Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and this is a video for the Libertarian View YouTube channel. And this video is called Understanding Economics. This is just a video for libertarians who may have not taken an economics course before, just to understand the basic ideas of economic thinking so you can apply that to your thinking about the issues. So what is economics? Economics is a social science that studies how individuals and groups produce and consume goods and services. It's all about understanding when people produce and people consume, how do those relationships come into existence? Why do they act the way they are now, and why do they change? Okay, and the reason this is important is because for a society to work, we're going to be producing goods and services, okay, because we're going to trade. But at the same time, people are going to want goods and services, and understanding how these relationships happen can help us understand how best to organize society so that way people's wants and needs can get fulfilled as much as possible. Okay, and increase our quality of life. Because I think most people can agree that pursuing a higher quality of life, meaning being able to pursue more of your wants and needs for more people, is generally a good direction to move things in. So we begin by taking a look at supply and demand curves. Now when you take a look at a supply and demand curve, also known as general equilibrium analysis, what happens is that there's two axes. One axis is the price, so that's the price of these particular good and service. So here we're ignoring that people have different wants and different things. We're taking a look at each good or service individually. So you can just insert your favorite good here. You can pretend that this is the supply and demand curve for, let's say, candy. Okay? So there's a price and then there's a quantity axis at the bottom. So when you take a look at a supply curve, this is the decision of, how much are people willing to supply. So the quantity is how much are people willing to supply at any given price. So as the price gets higher, meaning I can sell stuff for more, then the more I'm going to be willing to make because I can sell more at a higher price. If the price gets lower, I'm not going to want to sell as much, so I'm going to sell less. Okay, so that's why you see that it's an upward sloping curve, because as the price rises, so does the quantity supplied. I'm willing to make more. But demand is the opposite. Okay, the more expensive it gets, the more I'm willing to demand, meaning the more I'm going to want to have. So the more expensive candy gets, the less candy I want. So that's how you end up with a downward sloping curve. Okay? So basically, as the price gets cheaper, I'm willing to buy more candy. Okay, now the thing about these curves, before I talk about equilibrium, the third chart you see there, is why would the curve move right or left? Okay, so you'll talk about right or left curve shifts. Now, whenever there's an increase in supply or demand fundamentally, the curve will shift to the right. Okay, so basically, imagine that the red line for supply moves right of where it is now. That means even at a lower price, there's still more supply that they're willing to supply. The reason that would happen is because maybe there's better technology to supply goods. Yeah, usually that'd probably be the biggest reason. Now, if the demand curve shifted right, that would mean like people want it more. So maybe there's a reason that people want it more, so the whole curve shifts to the right. So even at a higher price, people will want to even demand more than they did originally. Vice versa, if the curves shift left, that could mean the opposite. So like a decrease in productive technology, so that means like a factory blew up, so they're not going to be able to make as much even at a higher price, so the curve would shift left. The supply curve, that is. And the demand curve would shift left if suddenly people found out like candy caused cancer, and they're like, even at a low price, we don't want it anymore. So the whole curve would shift left. Now the point at which these two curves meet at any given point in time, okay, and let's kind of put this in perspectives, these curves represent a moment in time. So at any moment in time, there is sort of this hypothetical imaginary curve at different prices, okay, representing people's values and preferences and what they want. But people's values and preferences are constantly changing. So these curves are constantly changing at every moment as people change their wants and needs. But at any given point, there is a price where the demand curve and the supply curve meet. And if that's the price, at that moment in time, the market would clear, meaning the amount supplied would equal the amount demanded. So you wouldn't make too much and you wouldn't make too little. Now over time, while the price of any good will never be at equilibrium because people's wants and needs are constantly changing, it does move closer to equilibrium for a couple different reasons. Okay, because if you're the supplier, if you put the price too high, you'll end up with a surplus. You'll end up with too much, stuff, a surplus, and that's not necessarily a good thing because it costs money to have a bunch of stuff just laying around. So in that case, you will lower the price next time you make more stuff and see if that works better. Now, if you put the price too low, you'll sell out of it too quickly, and you're gonna have a bunch of customers complaining, why isn't there more for them? So you'll have a shortage. In that case, they're like, well, I could have charged more and still made more money. So they'll raise the price next time. So because the suppliers have an incentive to find that equilibrium, because if they have too much, they don't want to carry the extra supply, so they're going to want to lower the cost. And if they sell too little, they could have made more if they charged more, so they'll charge more. Suppliers have a natural incentive to kind of discover that equilibrium price. So markets trend towards equilibrium. They never get there because it's constantly changing, but they move in that direction as long as people are free to make those kind of decisions. But not all. Some goods have a different aspect called elasticity, meaning elasticity means how sensitive any supply of demand of something is to price changes. So there's elastic supply, there's elastic demand. All just depends on how sensitive it is. Now, the best way to think of something with an elastic supply, it's something that's very easy to make. So that means if people want more, you can make more, and if people want less, you can easily ranch down and make less. So things that have that are fairly inexpensive and easy to make less or more of will have a very elastic supply. So price goes up, we'll make more. Price goes down, we'll make less. Easy. Now, inelastic supply are things that are pretty hard to make more or less of. So these would be things like oil, natural resources have very inelastic supplies. It's not like you can just ranch up the production of gold if suddenly there's a huge demand or increase in demand for gold. So in that case, no matter how high the price of gold or oil is, the supply, production, or the amount of quantity being supplied by the markets tends to be the same, because they can't just suddenly say, hey, we're going to double our production. Now, demand is more about whether people need it or want it. If it's something that people need, it has an inelastic demand. In a sense, this would be something like medicine. Like if you're a diabetic, insulin would be a very inelastic good. Why? Because let's say the price doubles of insulin. If you're a diabetic, you still need insulin, so you're going to buy it anyways. So in that case, you have to buy it. While something like candy would be very elastic. If they raise the price of candy, you're going to be like, you know what, I'm not going to buy it. And the elasticity of a good has a lot to do with kind of how, if a price can get to equilibrium, or if maybe there's even multiple equilibrium points. Because again, in the case of something with inelastic demand, no matter, maybe at different points, people will still buy the same amount because they still need the same amount. So that's elasticity. Opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is just the idea that every time you make a decision to do something, there's a decision you didn't make. So if you took a look at your most likely alternative, so let's see here, like let's say I had to choose between producing 10 apples, or actually here's an example, Susie and Janet both want to see me on Sunday. If I see Susie, my opportunity cost would be seeing Janet. So the fact that I don't see Janet and what would have happened if I saw Janet, that would have been my opportunity cost. The cost of what didn't happen that could have happened. So when you make a decision, it's not only your economic cost, like how many dollars and cents you have to pay to do something, but you also have the cost that there was something else you did not do. And who knows, hypothetically, it's a possibility that other thing may have made you more money. So not only there's the upfront cost of a decision, but there's the opportunity cost of a decision, the unseen cost. Competition. Now, competition is just the fact of when different firms attempt to win over consumers in providing goods and services. So in the sense that there's many different people who want to sell you candy. There's many different people who want to sell you insulin. There's many different people who want to be your doctor. So they compete. And the problem is, there's not a problem, but the problem for the firms is that to win over a consumer, they have to win over in different areas, whether it be quality, price, and in communication. So one, you have to make sure that it's a price that's competitive against everybody else who's offering the same good. If they charge too much compared to everybody else, then you're probably not going to go with them. Their quality has to be comparable. So if they're charging you more for less, you're probably not going to go with them. So if they are going to charge you more, they have to give you more. Or if they're going to charge you the same as everybody else, they have to give you something reasonable to everybody else. So quality and prices get lower, quality gets higher because they have to. They have no choice. And one of the more interesting things is communication. Okay, and I think people don't talk about the benefit of this in competition enough, in the sense that one thing is you're not going to be aware of every single person you can get X good or service from. So in that case, the ones who also communicate with you and learn to express the value of their good and service the best also win. And this leads to people experimenting in the way they communicate, which also leads to better communication of ideas, value, etc. And this can help increase the adoption of new products. So when there's like a new product, like let's say smartphones, the fact that there's this competition trying to convince people not only to choose them, but to just choose the product class altogether of smartphones, increases the adoption of new technologies, which is to everyone's benefit, because it increases economies of scale and allows sort of new things to happen along the way. Competition also helps balance political power. Now, if you have a market where, and for a particular good or service, where there's only one provider, aka monopoly, which could happen naturally, maybe they just have a very strong dominant position and they provide a lot of value, or maybe through politics. But once that firm has that solid position in the market, what can happen is they can have a lot of influence politically over the political system, which they can use to their advantage afterwards because they're the sole provider, and the economy becomes a little bit more sort of reliant on them. And while there may be other firms that challenge them later, in the interim that firm has a lot of political power. So the more competition, the more you don't have to worry about one firm taking sort of political control in a sense. Externalities, these are costs on third parties. So for example, there's positive and there's negative externalities. Like for example, if you don't bathe and you smell and you go to work, there's a negative externality. That was your choice, your decision, but now everybody else is suffering because of something you chose to do, based on no decisions of their own. That's an externality. Okay, a positive externality would be if you did bathe and you smelled good and you go to work, everyone's day is more pleasant because you did it, not because you were doing it for them, but because you wanted to be clean. Okay, so you made a decision and it meant a positive or negative consequence for other people who weren't involved in that decision. Those are externalities. Okay, everyone likes positive externalities, no one likes negative externalities. Like the person who really talked about externalities was an economist named Cecil Pigou. And Cecil Pigou basically talked about taxing negative subsidies and subsidizing good externalities. Okay, so a lot of people will talk about Pigouvian taxes in the sense of taxes on negative things, like sin taxes. Okay. Now, money is an important thing in the economy. So we know dollars. We use money on a daily basis to transact. But what is it? A money is something that serves as three functions: a store of value. So for example, let's imagine a barter economy where people don't use money to buy things, they actually use stuff to buy things. So if I want to get your goat, I'll trade you my sheep. But in this economy, let's say I'm a banana picker. Okay, and I pick bananas. Problem is the bananas won't last forever, and maybe I cannot find somebody who has something I want to trade the bananas for. So in that case, I'm losing the fruits of my labor. I can't store the value of my work today in those bananas because they won't last long. But what I can do is I can sell to somebody for money. Okay, and I can use that money later when there is something that I want. So I'm storing the value of my work in that money. So money acts as a store of value. A medium of exchange. Because there's money, I can trade with other people. We do this all the time. In a unit of measurement, I can measure how profitable one company is versus another company because we do everything in money. We do all exchange in money. So now we can actually measure the extent of which firm's activities economically better. So money serves that function and is very important for large-scale economic coordination. Interest. Think of interest as the cost to borrow capital. It's an expression of many things, such as time preference. So for example, if people don't really want to buy stuff right now, meaning they have a low time preference or a low propensity to consume, that means they'll be willing to lend out the money cheaper because they're not going to do anything with it anyways. So they're not going to charge you as much. So that'd be a low interest rate. So a low interest rate would be a sign of a low time preference or a low propensity to consume. Okay? While a high time preference would be, or a high interest rate would be a sign of a high time preference because people want stuff now. So if you ask them to borrow that money, they're going to be like, well, if you want me to not get the stuff that I want, I'm going to charge you more. So you'll have a high interest rate, and that'd be a high time preference, high time propensity to consume. Okay, so if people want to buy stuff now, there's going to be higher interest rates. If people want to buy stuff later, there's going to be lower interest rates. Scarcity of capital. Okay, even if people want to buy or stuff now or later, if there isn't that much funds available in the first place, there isn't that much capital available to lend out in the first place, that could also be reflected in interest rates. So interest rates are high, that may mean a scarcity of available capital, while if interest rates are low, that may mean a abundance of capital. Okay, and also the expected value of the application. So in that case, if interest rate, if I'm willing to lend you money at 5%, that means I'm expecting you to do, or if you're willing to borrow money from me at 5%, that means probably what you're going to do with the money is going to make you more than 5%, or else you wouldn't borrow the money from me. Okay, so you expect the return on what you're going to do with that money to be worth more than the interest that you have to pay me for it. So basically, if I charge you 10%, and you thought that what you're going to do with the money was only a benefit of 5%, then you would choose not to borrow the money from me, even though I'm asking for 10%. So the interest rates are where these two variables sort of interject. Okay, and then there's business cycles. Now, business cycles are the ups and downs in the economy. Okay, and there's several different theories that sort of explain business cycles. There's Austrian business cycle theory, which basically talks about if there's suddenly a surge of an increase in the money supply artificially, what happens is that suddenly that will make it appear like there's or an abundance of capital, which will cause interest rates to go down. So people sort of get that wrong signal, and it's not that they'll borrow too much money, but they'll borrow the money and put it into the wrong places, aka malinvestment. So the problem is that since the money's put into the wrong place, people don't get necessarily the return. So let's say I borrow money at 5% and then end up investing it at a return of 3%. Okay, what happens? I end up losing. Okay, and if that happens on a very large scale economically, you end up with a slump later on. So you put the money in the wrong places. Then there's sort of a focus on endogenous factors. It's sort of the Keynesian approach, where the economy is just kind of, long as it's working, it's going up, but maybe something changes in the economy, like a law increases inequality or causes some sort of way for the economy not to function the way it was before. So then you have a slump, and you have to kind of fix that by first socking it with some money. Then there's exogenous factors, or real business cycle theory, which is sort of a supply side way of looking at things, where the economy just works if you leave it alone, but sometimes something outside of it, like international trade, globalization, new technology, these things that are outside of the actual economy will then come and shock the economy and cause a slump. Then there's sort of the Hyman Minsky, Irving Fisher approach, which focuses a lot on just debt. So it's not necessarily malinvestment. It's not that you borrowed money and put it in the wrong places. It's just that there's so much money borrowed that at some point that amount of debt will cause a drag. Okay, and then that's when you have a Minsky moment, where the economy changes from being sort of very robust and strong to weak and fragile. Okay, because of the amount of debt. Then the economy has to deleverage, and then you have a deleveraging cycle, like Irving Fisher would say, where basically people pay off their debts. Problem is, when people stop spending to pay off their debts, their asset prices go down in value. Okay, so that causes the more people have to sit there and force pay on the debts, and you have this big cycle of dropping asset prices and deleveraging that goes on for a while and causes the economy to sort of unwind for a bit. Okay, so those are different ways of looking at the business cycle. Okay, so hopefully that was a good overview of economics and the economy. Okay, my name is Alex Merced. This is the Libertarian View YouTube channel. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you guys didn't hear more from me, my name is Alex Merced. I have a website called alexmerced.com and another website for economics called learneconomicsnow.com. Check it out. Have a great day and enjoy.